one of my favorite things about anime? It's the ability to suspend my sense of disbelief while I watch them. Sometimes in life, I'm over-analytical, and that can pull me out of conversations or just straight up stop me from enjoying things that otherwise I would be able to enjoy. However, when I see something animated, I'm able to suspend my disbelief. I'm able to believe that bending over at the waist and sticking your arms behind your back does allow you to run faster. I'm able to believe that regardless of how bad your best friend treats you, you'll always try to bring them back. I'm able to believe that simply by screaming out a couple of key phrases, you'll undergo a crazy powerful power-up. And that's the beauty of anime, and I'm sure the reason so many of us watch it. The step out of the stark, harsh reality that we live in. These worlds built by other people where anything can truly be possible. And while it is absolutely incredibly fun to be able to suspend your disbelief and throw yourself into this universe, to be fully immersed, at the same time, it's also sometimes fun to apply reason to these universes. And in a way that plays very much into the suspension of disbelief. See, because not until you're fully immersed in these universes and you understand how things work in these universes can you truly begin to reason with what's going on in it. Not until you understand chakra, kekkei, taijutsu, ninjutsu, and all the other things that make the Naruto universe so special can you truly begin to look at events and wonder, did that make sense? And to me, at least, that's half the fun. Seeing if these universes play by the rules that they themselves set up. And I will admit, out of all of the manga I've read and the anime I've watched, Naruto does one of the best jobs at sticking to its own rules. Which is why a couple of days ago, when I was sent a CBR article titled, "These 10 Naruto Jutsu Make Absolutely No Sense," I knew I had to give it a read. Because here's the thing. Naruto is not the perfect IP, and there is absolutely times when it breaks the rules that it sets for itself. However, if you do find yourself consistently confused and thrown off by the things that are happening in Naruto, that's more of an indictment on you than Kishimoto. And thus today, we're gonna dive into the CBR article and truly see if there are 10 jutsus in Naruto that make no sense. And listen, I am very ready to accept the fact that there are some jutsu in Naruto that don't make sense. However, I would reckon that the misunderstandings surrounding the majority of the jutsu on this list don't come from a place of fault on Kishimoto's side, but rather a lack of information on the reader's side. And today, I want to provide that information. Because today, we're talking these 10 Naruto jutsu make absolutely no sense, debunked. But before we get to debunking anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. But before we get into all that, today we gotta talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, HelloFresh. Listen, not all of us are the professional chefs we grew up thinking we would be. We don't all have 50 recipes committed to memory. However, that's where HelloFresh comes into play. See, with HelloFresh, there's always new flavors to pick from, as they have an ever-changing menu with 50 recipes to choose from every single week. And to get access to those meals, all you gotta do is select your meals and your delivery date. It's that simple. No more endless recipe searching or buying entire racks of spices you only use once. With HelloFresh, everything you need to make a delicious meal comes directly to your door every week, pre-portioned and fresh, with instruction cards telling you exactly how to make it. And with that many menu options, any lifestyle you're trying to live can be accommodated with HelloFresh, as they have menu options that fit under categories of fit and wholesome, quick and easy, family-friendly, vegan, and so much more. There is genuinely something for everyone to enjoy from HelloFresh. I personally have used HelloFresh for almost 7 years, and without HelloFresh coming into my life, I'd still weigh 205 right now. However, because HelloFresh taught me how to cook lean and healthy meals, I was able to lose 50 pounds after joining HelloFresh. But enough talking about how HelloFresh has transformed my life. Let me show you. And one of the things I love about HelloFresh is that it pushes me to try to cook meals that usually I wouldn't make.
Our first step is to wash the rice. And yes, other white people, apparently you need to wash your rice. Next up, we gotta get our mise en place. And yes, I do it like this every single night. I have OCD, leave me alone.
The ingredients for our meatballs together and mash them up. Just that's a nightmare to watch. I apologize. Pull out our meatballs, put them in the oven. I only have one hand. Coat our freshly cooked meatballs in sauce. Yeah, absolutely should have used a bowl for this.
And when you know it, it's the most glorious sound in the world. Rice is ready. Put it all together, and just like that, dinner is served. Don't look at mine. Why are you looking at mine?
I don't care about plating, but I do care about flavor. And with HelloFresh, I get that. So what are you guys waiting for? Get up to 10 free meals and free shipping on your first box at HelloFresh.com with code 10FMNCHammer23. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's up to 10 free HelloFresh meals and free shipping. Just go to HelloFresh.com with code 10FMNCHammer23. It's time we get cooking, weebs. So, this article opens with a paragraph describing what we're going to be talking about today. And the second part of this intro says, one of the particularly unique and fascinating parts of the Naruto franchise is its jutsu, which is the mystical art that ninjas use in battle. By utilizing a ninja's chakra and forming hand seals, Naruto's cast of characters have thousands of different types of jutsu at their fingertips. While most of the show's techniques are well thought out, sometimes the jutsu shown on the screen defy all logic, physics, or lacks consistency entirely. Although not all jutsu in Naruto makes sense, one thing is for sure. They certainly make the story one of the most interesting in all of anime. This is a really good way to cover yourself. If you're writing a salacious article about Naruto, you're like, hey, listen, I'm just gonna say a couple of these jutsus don't make sense, but Naruto is still really good. Please don't hit me. But here I am, big stick in hand. So let's get to this not so great list. Coming up at number 10, we have the transformation jutsu is a basic but shallow technique. The logic of the transformation technique often defies reality. And unfortunately, this is going to be a through line that we see throughout the majority of this article. The fact that some jutsu defy reality. And to me, that's an absolutely insane reason to say that a jutsu does not make sense. This is a story about ninjas who eventually become chakra mechs. And these ninjas got their ninja powers because a couple thousand years ago, an alien descended down to their planet with hopes of consuming it whole, fell in love with one of the humans that lived there, had a child with that human that created a half-human, half-alien baby, and then that half-alien baby walked around the entire globe and gave everybody a form of spiritual energy that they were eventually able to combine with their physical energy to make chakra and ninjutsu. None of this story has any logic whatsoever, so trying to apply real-world logic to Naruto and therefore say that the jutsus inside of Naruto don't make sense because they don't abide by our physical rules is insane. But we haven't even got into their explanation, so let's do that now. The article goes on to say, in Naruto, the transformation technique is a general skill ninjutsu that allows the user to take on the appearance of whatever they like. In its simplest terms, the transformation technique is incredibly powerful. Characters can turn into another person, animal, plant, or even an inanimate object. And yeah, that is how the transformation technique works. It's allowed Naruto to turn himself into a shuriken and Gamabunta into Kurama. It's insane. However, the author of this article goes on to say, it may be fairly easy to suspend one's disbelief and accept that the Naruto characters can transform at will. There we go, we've nailed it. That's actually all we needed to do. That sentence right there, perfect. Article done. But unfortunately, he continues by saying, but the transformation technique often lacks consistency needed for it to make more sense. How does the jutsu fool some sensory ninjas with ease while others see right through it? The way it alters size and mass is also not entirely clear and often defies any sense of logic in the series. So there's a couple of key points in here I want to address. The first being the first question here. How does the jutsu fool some sensory ninjas with ease while others see right through it? The transformation technique is not perfect. That has been established multiple times. Very, very early on in Naruto, it was established that people with keen noses like Kiba, Akamaru, or even Kakashi would be able to see through a transformation technique because they know the scent of the people around them. But this isn't even the only way to see through the transformation technique. Who's ever transforming into somebody else doesn't have that person's memories, and therefore they wouldn't know how that person would interact with other people in their lives, and they don't have the person they're transforming into's memories. This is why things like Ino's mind transfer jutsu are so incredibly powerful, because Ino has the ability to transfer into other people's bodies, and upon transferring her consciousness into somebody else's body, not only is she piloting their physical body, not a fake that she conjured, but she also has access to all of their memories. On top of this, users of a dojutsu can see through a transformation technique by watching the flow of chakra. Any user of a Byakugan and skilled users of a Sharingan should be able to see somebody's chakra network. If they have the chakra network of the person who's being transformed into memorized, they'll be able to notice discrepancies between their new chakra network and the one they have memorized. So there's a lot of ways to see through the transformation technique. It's why it's not a perfect jutsu. Any high-ish level sensor ninja should be able to see through it immediately. However, different sensor ninjas have different sensory abilities, and some sensory abilities lend themselves to seeing through a transformation technique better than others. The second point I want to address here is the way it alters size and mass is also not entirely clear, and often defies any sense or logic in the series. Here's the thing about the Naruto universe. The conservation of mass has never been an equation that Kishimoto brought into play. This isn't rare amongst anime and manga. Pretty much the only anime and manga that worries about the conservation of mass is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, but it's been established multiple times that there is no conservation of mass in the Naruto universe. Monkeykin Enma has the ability to turn himself into a staff that not only he can use Shadow Clone Jutsu with to duplicate infinitely, well, not infinitely, but a lot, but Monkey King Enma also has the ability to extend as that pole actually infinitely. High-level water ninjutsu technique users are able to make entire oceans simply by spewing them out of their mouths. And shadow clones, while they don't have a physical form, are able to come into physical contact with the people and things of the real world. And therefore, they must technically have mass if they're able to inflict that mass upon the people that they're fighting against. So conservation of mass has never been a thing in the Naruto universe. That's why Naruto is able to turn Gamabunta into Kurama, even though Kurama is much bigger than Gamabunta. So yeah, the transformation technique is somewhat inconsistent according with our real-life rules, but in Naruto, where a monkey can turn himself into an adamantite staff, and a boy can turn himself into an iron shuriken, we're not worrying about density or the conservation of mass. But enough about the transformation technique, let's get on to everyone's favorite talking point, Itachi, because coming up at number 9, we have the exploding shadow clones have underutilized power. Why isn't the strong jutsu utilized by other ninja? Now, for those of you who don't remember, Itachi uses a version of shadow clone that he is able to explode remotely. But the author does a pretty good job explaining it here, so let's get into it. The Bunshin Dai Bakua, or Great Clone Explosion, allows its users to create a shadow clone with the intention of their opportunities attacking the clone at close range before it explodes. It is a destructive and deadly technique, but considering how powerful it is, it's surprising that other ninjas aren't utilizing this jutsu. Shadow clones are widely accessible in Naruto, yet the explosive version is exclusively used by Sasuke's older brother, Itachi Uchiha. The exploding shadow clones also seem to have a weakness where if the opponent notices it's a clone, they may be able to escape the explosion, but this too lacks consistency at times. Now, there's a lot wrong in here that I'd like to talk about, so let's get into it. One, looking at a jutsu that Itachi uses and saying, why doesn't everybody use that, is kind of like looking at Mozart and saying, why doesn't everybody compose music like that? Itachi is by far and away one of the most skilled ninja in the entirety of Naruto, and therefore to assume that anybody could do any of the jutsus that Itachi can is a massive stretch. Itachi had access to things that other ninjas couldn't even dream of. He had the Sword of Totsuka, Yaramir, Kodomatsu Kame, Tsukiyomi, Amaterasu. He can use the exploding clones when other people can't because he's simply a better ninja than 99.9% of ninjas. We then go on to say that shadow clones are widely accessible in Naruto, and this couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, obviously, a fair amount of the main characters of the story do use shadow clones. Absolutely. Kakashi, Naruto, Sasuke, Itachi, any of the upper echelon of ninjas use shadow clones, 100%. However, the literal creator of shadow clones, Tobirama, can only use 3. That should put into focus exactly how hard it is to use shadow clones. Well, obviously, we, as the people who watch Naruto week in and week out, think, oh, using shadow clones must be easy. Naruto does it all the time. Think about all of the characters that you never see use shadow clones. In fact, the majority of the Konoha 12 never use shadow clones. Did you ever see Tenten use a shadow clone? Hinata, Shino, Neji. You ever see Kiba, Ino, Shikamaru, Choji use a shadow clone? Answer is no. Shadow clone usage is exceedingly rare. And while yes, a lot of the ninja we spend a fair amount of time with do use shadow clone, that's because we only hang out with the strongest ninjas. So if only the strongest ninjas can use shadow clones because of how difficult and chakra taxing using them is, wouldn't it make a lot of sense that a lot of people don't make it to the stronger version of shadow clones? Also, Itachi isn't the only person to use some kind of exploding shadow clone. Deidara does it, Kakashi does it, hell, even in a sense, Hashirama does it. Plenty of the people that exist in the upper echelon of ninja apply an elemental release to their shadow clones. They then use those shadow clones to try and apply that elemental release to the person who punches them. So Itachi is not alone in this by a long shot. But enough about shadow clones, let's talk about shadow clones. Because coming up at number 8, we have multiple shadow clone techniques are impressive but flawed. Naruto's iconic ability breaks rules established early in the series. I'd love to see where we're going with this. The multiple shadow clone technique allows its users to create a number of clones, with a single clone requiring half a user's chakra. Yes, that is technically how it works for one clone. I feel as though it's important we get that out of the way here. If you have one clone, that one clone will have half your chakra. Absolutely 100%. However, if you have 2 clones, each clone will have 33% of your chakra, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the less shadow clones you have, the stronger the shadow clones you make are. This doesn't mean that every single shadow clone that you make has half of your chakra. That makes no sense. The author continues by saying, the multiple shadow clone technique uses great amounts of chakra and is a dangerously unsafe move, but Naruto is often shown making dozens or even thousands of clones of himself. Yeah, 100%. Using multi-shadow clone jutsu is dangerous. It's why it's forbidden. The author continues by saying, Naruto's iconic usage of multi-shadow clone jutsu is undeniably impressive, but it also breaks the chakra rules established early on in the series. How can a genin, like Naruto, known for poor chakra control, reasonably sustain so many clones, even without actually accessing Kurama's chakra? And like, the answer isn't all that complicated. Obviously, yes, in the first episode, we see Naruto make hundreds of clones, but this is able to set the precedent that Naruto is only able to tap into the entirety of his power in situations of great need. Naruto making hundreds of clones does not mean that each and every single one of these clones has 50% of his chakra. It means that if Naruto makes 99 clones, he has 1% of his original chakra. Now, while 1% of his original chakra does sound dangerous, and it absolutely is, Naruto has such an immense amount of chakra as a half Uzumaki and the Asura Reincarnate that 1% of chakra is more chakra than some people have at 100%. In fact, in the Land of Waves arc, Kakashi identifies that Naruto has more chakra than him, a full-fledged Anbu-trained Jonin. And that's without measuring Kurama's chakra. On top of that, how do we know in any of these moments when Naruto is using multi-shedded clone jutsu that he isn't tapping into Kurama's chakra? In fact, the 8 trigram seal was used on Naruto specifically so Kurama's chakra would leak into Naruto's chakra, and slowly but surely, Naruto would get used to it and be able to use it. At this point right here in episode 1, Naruto's 12 years old. That chakra's been leaking into his system for 12 years. And while Naruto's chakra doesn't turn orange and he doesn't grow whiskers and his teeth don't turn into fangs, it doesn't mean that Naruto isn't using Kurama's chakra. It just means that Kurama's chakra isn't taking him over. So that was completely nonsensical. Maybe the next one will be better. It probably won't be, because coming up at number 7, we have the calorie control technique makes no sense scientifically. And my God, what are you talking about? If there's one jutsu that makes sense scientifically in Naruto, it's calorie control. In fact, if I had to choose one jutsu that could probably be used in real life, it would be calorie control. This is the last jutsu I would choose to talk about if we were talking science. But let's see, maybe he makes a great point to substantiate it here. The Akamichi clan Hijutsu, this is just short for hidden jutsu, move defies all logic in Naruto. The calorie control Hijutsu is used by characters like Choji and the rest of the Akamichi clan in Naruto as the basis for all of their techniques, but the very foundation of the jutsu makes absolutely no sense from a scientific standpoint. Once again, if we're actually trying to apply real-life scientific standards to any of the jutsu in Naruto, explain to me, using science, how Amaterasu works. The author continues, the ninjas are able to freely convert calories stored in their bodies into chakra, resulting in them being a gluttonous clan. While calorie control jutsu is a visually engaging form of jutsu, it is scientifically nonsense. It just doesn't make sense how the clan is able to instantaneously burn fat and convert it into energy for their techniques. There also appears to be no health consequences for using this ability repeatedly, which also feels pretty flimsy as far as storytelling is concerned. So once again, I'd like to establish that this is a universe that only exists because an alien banged a human and had a child that later sealed his mother inside of the moon. But sure, if we want to inject science into this, as somebody with a master's degree in biotechnology, I feel as though I'm more than suited for that conversation. Calorie control makes the most sense scientifically out of any jutsu in Naruto because it is just what humans do turned to 11. Yeah, obviously, no human's able to burn all of their fat reserves and turn it into energy instantaneously. But no human's also able to apply lightning to their hand and stab through the chest of their childhood love. Calorie control as a jutsu bases its root in reality. Humans burn the things that they eat into something known as ADP, adenosine triphosphorate, which is an energy mover in your body that allows you to do things like move your limbs and self-regulate your heat. Now, if your body has things like carbohydrates in its stomach, it's able to break those down easily and turn that into ATP. However, if your body has absolutely nothing to burn in your stomach, it starts to burn fat, because fat is an incredibly dense energy storage mechanism optimized by all living beings to pack on to living beings so that it can be used as emergency energy reserves if they run out of food. So essentially what's happening with the Akamichi is that they pack on as much fat as possible so they're able to burn that fat into chakra. That's all that's happening. And considering the fact that chakra is a mix of spiritual and physical energy, basically all of the Akamichi are doing is converting fat into energy, which is something that you and I do every single day. And is it turned up to 11? 100%, but it's also an anime. So scientifically, there is no jutsu in Naruto that makes more sense than calorie control. This is asinine. My God, I hope this article gets better quickly. And apparently, admittedly, it does, because at number 6, we have Izanagi and Izunami somehow defy the laws of the universe. Sharingan-based genjutsu techniques aren't the easiest to believe. And listen, If you're gonna say one jutsu in the Naruto universe doesn't make sense within the confines of Naruto, Izanami and Izanagi are those jutsus. I genuinely believe Izanagi and Izunami are the two biggest mistakes that Kishimoto ever made. But I'm curious to see how this person comes to that conclusion. Izanagi and its related technique, Izunami, are incredibly powerful jutsu techniques that allow the user to essentially alter reality. With Izanagi, the jutsu user applies an illusion to reality, controlling what is real for as long as it is active. And yeah, that's exactly how it works. Izanagi is again jutsu you cast on the entire world that essentially gives you access to the creation of all things jutsu that belonged to Hagoromo for a limited amount of time. The author elaborates by saying, these Sharingan based genjutsu push the boundaries of believability, even in a world of Naruto. Both jutsu require sacrifice of Sharingan eyes, but their mechanics are so abstract and vaguely explained that they tend to feel more like plot devices meant to get the user out of a sticky situation when they'd otherwise have no way to avoid death. Here's the thing. If you want to call Izanagi a plot device, I can ride with you on that one, 100%. Izanagi was absolutely introduced so Obito would have a way to get out of the battle against Konan without Konan technically losing. Or at least without having Konan lose in a way that didn't feel like she could have won if Obito didn't cheat. And unfortunately, the introduction of Izanagi introduced a ton of plot holes into the Naruto universe. Yes, we got some exposition on Izanagi being used in the past and how Izanami was created to counteract it, but at the end of the day, people who had access to tons of Sharingan, like Obito, should have been using Izanagi way more often. And while Madara and Obito do both use Izanagi once, they should have been using it way more than that. However, the mechanics of Izanami and Izanagi aren't necessarily that hazy. In a world where creation of all things exists in connection to the Sage of Six Paths, and Yin and Yang release can be used simultaneously, actually how Izanagi works makes a fair amount of sense. Simply stated, Izanagi accesses both Yin and Yang chakra, using Yin chakra to make a chakra illusion and Yang chakra to make that illusion reality. It's not that complicated, and Izanami is just an incredibly powerful genjutsu. But if you wanted to call Izanami and Izanagi plot devices, I can get behind that. But fundamentally, they're not that complicated. Do they belong in the Naruto universe? I'll say no, but I wouldn't say they don't make sense. They're explained pretty well. But since we're talking about Hagoromo and the creation of all things, let's get to our number 5 spot here, which says the creation of all things uses the power of imagination. Why didn't the Sage of Six Paths imagine a better world? And there's so many things wrong with just this one sentence, I literally don't even know where to begin. But hey, listen, maybe they explain themselves. Most legendary character in all of Naruto's lore, Hagoromo Otsutsuki used the creation of all things technique to turn fantasy into reality with the forms of basic yin and yang chakras. The tailed beasts were created using this technique, but one thing about it just doesn't make sense. The concept feels godlike, which makes sense given Hagoromo's amazing power in the world of Naruto, but it also raises the question, why didn't the sage use it to fix the conflicts of the ninja world permanently? The technique feels underexplored and overpowered, and a character as epic as Hagoromo deserved for his key part of the story to be explained properly. The technique is not underexplained and or overpowered. It's not overpowered because the only person that we've ever known to have access to it is Hagoromo, and it's not underexplained because we know exactly how it works. See, this is something that people often do. They say, oh, Hagoromo had the ability to create whatever he wants. Why didn't he make a perfect universe? Why didn't he make sure that humans would never give in to greed or corruption? If Hagoromo had the creation of all things jutsu, why didn't he just use that in battle against Kaguya? And here's the thing. Hagoromo doesn't get access to the creation of all things jutsu until he becomes the Sage of Six Paths. That is to say, after he defeats Kaguya and she's sealed in the moon. It's not until Hagoromo becomes the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails and is able to use the Ten Tails power that he gets this power. But the creation of all things jutsu is not omnipotence. It has a battery. It is very clearly stated that Hagoromo converts the power of the Ten Tails into the Nine-Tailed Beasts. That is to say that the creation of all things jutsu allows for Hagoromo to convert his energy into anything. And while maybe, hypothetically, Hagoromo could have converted the power of the Ten Tails into global peace, that's an incredibly abstract concept that may not have been achievable with his jutsu. Essentially, what Hagoromo did is, like with Izanagi, he created chakra constructs that were imaginary with yin release and then made them physical with yang release. The only reason he was able to do this was because he was converting the power of the Ten Tails into these Nine-Tailed Beasts. And therefore, without this incredibly large battery to convert into 9 smaller batteries, none of this would have been accessible for Hagoromo in the first place. On top of that, when Hagoromo was walking around as the Sage of Six Paths, there weren't conflicts in the ninja world. In fact, one of the biggest talking points revolving around Hagoromo and Hamura is that Hagoromo tried to unify the world through ninju. And not until after his passing did people begin to combine ninju with physical energy and create chakra and therefore ninjutsu and therefore ninja conflicts. And while yes, you can make the argument that Hagoromo would be able to use the creation of all things jutsu to make Ashura and Indra like each other, once again, that's an incredibly abstract concept. The creation of all things jutsu more applies to the creation of physical objects. So once again, just a big old swing and a miss here. But since we're talking about overpowered jutsus, let's move on to our number 4 spot, which is Reincarnation Jutsu gives the dead limitless power. The powerful technique is not without its flaws. And here's the thing, Edo Tensei does absolutely, in some senses, boost the power of the people who are brought back. But that's also only in incredibly specific scenarios. But let's see how they substantiate this point. Edo Tensei, or summoning impure world reincarnation, is a form of jutsu that binds a dead person's soul to a living vessel, bringing them back from the dead. This technique goes through active development in the series, with Tobirama Senju originally creating it before Orochimaru discovered it and approved upon it. Kabuto Yakushi would go on to nearly perfect the jutsu during his time with it. Kabuto's version of Reincarnation Jutsu brings ninjas back with seemingly limitless power and invincibility. It doesn't do either of those things, but it also lacks consistency. How does the technique maintain their bodies, even when no physical remains are left? Some of the reincarnated ninjas also feel more powerful than others, making the mechanics of Reincarnation Jutsu feel even more inconsistent at times. Okay, there's a lot, and I mean a lot wrong with this second paragraph. Kabuto's version of Reincarnation Jutsu brings ninjas back with seemingly limitless power and invincibility. It doesn't bring ninjas back with either limitless power or invincibility. Yes, any ninja who's brought back with Edo Tensei who isn't injured with something like an expansive Truth Seeker orb is able to regenerate their body. But that's not invincibility. All of these ninjas can be rather easily sealed using Fuin Jutsu of a high enough order. On top of that, because Kabuto brings so many ninja back to life, he can't control the psyche of all of the ninjas he's brought back. And therefore, they all have one massive glaring weakness, and it's that the majority of them don't want to be fighting against their former comrades. And therefore, the majority of them are able to key their comrades into how to defeat them, and some of them, like Hanzo the Salamander, are actively able to destroy their own bodies such that the person that they're fighting against is able to seal them. On top of that, they're not brought back with limitless power. They're brought back with the ability to infinitely refill their chakra, but they're brought back with the same amount of power that they had at the moment of their death. So people like Hashirama or Hiruzen, who died at the end of their natural lives, aren't brought back at the peak of their power. In fact, they're brought back kind of weak and decrepit comparatively to what their peak power looked like. And there's no better example of this than Nagato, who should objectively be one of the most powerful people when brought back to life, but literally could not walk without the assistance of Itachi. No, they're not brought back with limitless power. They're brought back as powerful as they were at the moment of their death, with the ability to infinitely refill their chakra. And while that is absolutely a big boost in the case of people like Itachi, who are notoriously known for running out of chakra, the majority of the people that we see fight in Naruto don't run out of chakra, and therefore the ability to infinitely refill their chakra doesn't actually add that much. But don't worry, there's more wrong with this paragraph, as the article goes on to say, how does the technique maintain their bodies even though no physical remains are left? And what? We know exactly, literally exactly how Edo Tensei works. A human body sacrifice and genetic material from the person you're trying to bring back to life are needed. The human sacrifice acts as the base of the Edo Tensei, while the genetic material draws a bridge between that sacrifice and the Pure Lands to grab the soul out of the Pure Lands, which is Ninja Heaven, and thrust it into that sacrificed body. So there are physical remains left. Those physical remains literally have to be used to initiate Edo Tensei in the first place. So obviously the technique is able to maintain their body because their soul is quite literally inhabiting that body. But don't worry, it gets worse. As the article goes on to say, some of the reincarnated ninjas also feel more powerful than others, making the mechanics of the reincarnation jutsu feel even more consistent at times. I'm gonna give you 1 second to guess why some of the ninjas who are reincarnated may be stronger than others. Do you think it's possibly because some ninjas are stronger than others? Obviously, when Itachi is brought back to life, he's gonna be more powerful than Deidara, because Itachi is more powerful than Deidara. It's not a complicated idea, but sure, maybe you want to talk about Madara. Madara was very clearly stated to be augmented by Kabuto to be brought back in the prime of his life, with several different augmentations that made Madara as an Edo Tensei body stronger than he was even in the peak of his humanity. And this is because Kabuto did things like source his Rinnegan and add Hashirama's cells onto his body. So yeah, Madara came back stronger, but that's because Kabuto actively did work to make sure that he would. Like, what are we even talking about here? Do we have to hit a word count? Whatever, we're heading to the top 3 here. Maybe as we get to the top 3, things will start making more sense. Or maybe not, because at number 3, we have Kamui's pocket dimension is confusing. The power level of the created dimension makes no sense. And here's the thing, I will absolutely admit that Kamui is one of the least consistent jutsus in Naruto. For the longest time, we believed that Kakashi was able to Kamui things outside of his body, and Obito was able to Kamui things on his body. But that line got incredibly blurry with time, and eventually got to the point where both Kakashi and Obito were able to do both with their respective Kamui eyes. On top of this, it appears as though you can use the Kamui dimension to quite literally travel across the globe. Kind of like it's the netherworld, but that's never explained. But let's see what points they use to substantiate this claim. Kamui is a space-time ninjutsu that is used with Obito Obito Uchiha's Mangekyo Sharingan to transfer objects to or from another dimension. It is one of the most visually stunning jutsu in the series, but Kamui's mechanics remain pretty confusing. That I resonate with. I agree with that 100%. How does Kamui manage to selectively teleport objects, people, or parts of the user's body without causing immense damage? Using Kamui is the only known way to get to the dimension, which further complicates it. The power level of the jutsu also seems inconsistent, and it varies greatly depending on the plot's needs. So none of the things that I said. So let's tackle this first sentence here first. How does the Kamui manage to selectively teleport objects, people, or parts of the user's body without causing immense damage? The Kamui acts as a tunnel between the real world and the Kamoi Dimension. The user is able to choose how big the thing they want to Kamui is. And while it may appear as though when a Kamui user is using Kamui on somebody else, that the object that they're Kamuiing is getting twisted, that's just because a space-time ninjutsu portal is getting opened on that object. This is why when Data's arm gets Kamui'd off to the Kamoi Dimension, it's not twisted and mangled, it's just his arm gets separated from his body and therefore he loses it. The same could be said for the Ten Tails head. Kakashi quite literally tries to Kamui the Ten Tails head clean off its body, and the Ten Tails head twists as Kakashi's trying to do it. It twists to the point that its head should have been pulverized. However, when this jutsu is broken, the Ten Tails head is fine. Spinning of objects that are being sent to the Kamui Dimension is just a visual representation of those objects being sent into a space-time tunnel. And while it's technically never been stated, there is a mountain of evidence to prove that exact point. And thus it would make sense that body parts, specifically body parts sent by Obito to the Kamui Dimension, would have those same rules applied to them. But also there's the fact that Obito is using his Kamui on himself, and therefore it's not really about seeing something, it's more about the fact that his eye is connected to his body. So when you ask the question, why aren't Obito's body parts mangled when he sends them to the Kamui Dimension, the only real answer we have is because the Kamui Dimension belongs to Obito. We don't have a 100% dissertation proof answer, but it's Obito's ability, and it's by far and away not the craziest ability in Naruto. Like, yeah, if you wanted to ask the question, like, how is Obito able to send his heart into the Kamui Dimension and still have it pump blood into the rest of his body, I would say that's a good question. Does it make any sense? No, not really, but we're talking about metaphysics here. Kamui Dimension, just as a general rule, does it make sense? So if we just assume, like many do, that the Kamui Dimension is just an extension of Obito's body, then it makes a lot more sense. But let's talk about the last sentence of this paragraph here. The power level of the jutsu also seems inconsistent, and it varies greatly depending on the plot needs. And while I will admit the Kamui is very inconsistently powered, that's not a problem. The Kamui is an MS ability whose use actively leads to the blinding of the MS in question. It would make sense that the more power channeled into the usage of a Kamui, not only the more chakra that's being used, but also the more blindness that's being applied to said eye. So obviously the power level of the jutsu is going to seem inconsistent because it's going to get used differently in different scenarios. That is technically as the plot necessitates, I will admit, but it doesn't make sense to have a jutsu that has so much downside at maximum power every single chance you get. And therefore obviously Kakashi using Kamui to try and warp off the Ten Tails head is going to be different from him using Kamui to make sure a nail doesn't hit him in the forehead that's fired by Nagato. But to me, that just seems like common sense. But common sense hasn't really been a common thread in this article, so why am I surprised? But who knows? Maybe common sense will start to be applied in this next point. Because coming up at number 2, we have Infinite Tsukiyomi harnesses the power of the moon. Not really, but okay. The powerful genjutsu traps the world in a dream. Yes, it does. At least that's right. The author goes on to state that the Infinite Tsukiyomi genjutsu technique managed to put the entire world under an illusion, enslaving all creatures so that their chakra can be siphoned upon by the God Tree. While at its very core, the Infinite Tsukiyomi is one of Naruto franchise's most powerful abilities, it begins to make no sense when it's looked at a little more closely. Is it? Is it though? The idea behind the jutsu is a fascinating one, but its execution raises questions. How does the moon act as a medium for the jutsu? It's actually really clearly explained. You know, before we finish this paragraph, let's go ahead and address this question here. How does the moon act as a medium for the jutsu? Well, it was directly told to us by Madara the second that he awoke the Rinne Sharingan in his forehead, the jutsu that makes him able to use Infinite Tsukiyomi, that in order to apply it to the entire world, he needs to reflect his Rinne Sharingan off the moon. And by reflecting his Rinne Sharingan off the moon, the gigantic celestial body that the entire globe can see, he will essentially be making eye contact with the entire globe. Since we know for the transference of ocular-based genjutsus, eye contact is usually pretty important, by essentially making a moon-sized Rinne Sharingan in the sky that was staring down at the globe, everybody on said globe immediately came under the effects of Madara's genjutsu. It's not only not complicated, it's also heavily explained. But I digress. More importantly, why did the victims of the jutsus remain alive when their physical bodies are encased in tree roots? Why would they die? If you watch the launching of Infinite Tsukiyomi, and more importantly, the nabbing up of everybody using the God Tree, you'll see that the roots of the God Tree cocoon every human on Earth, and albeit kind of gently. Even if hypothetically you were to die inside of your cocoon, your chakra would still be siphoned into the god tree. Your chakra doesn't just dissipate the second that you die. Chakra, like energy or our bodies, returns to the earth after you pass away. So it technically wouldn't be the worst thing if a divine tree picked up a corpse. There is a vested interest in keeping a person alive because an alive person is able to refill their own chakra. And therefore the god tree can maximize how much chakra they get from each person by keeping that person alive. Also, why are we asking logic questions about a jutsu that requires a tree to grow roots to every single human on Earth and encase them in said roots? It is a world-ending technique that requires for every single human to be cast into their own personal version of heaven. Also, they can slowly but surely be siphoned off of all of their chakra and turned into a white Zetsu army. This is not the kind of thing that you apply logic to, and therefore saying the mechanics of infinite Tsukiyomi are far too convenient for such a world-changing technique is absurd. Of course, the mechanics of a world-ending technique are going to be convenient, otherwise it wouldn't be a world-ending technique. And considering the fact that this technique needs a 10 tails, an Otsutsuki to be fed to said 10 tails, and a Rinne Sharingan, of which only 2 have ever existed that we've known of, I wouldn't say the mechanics of this technique are convenient. But since we're talking about massively powerful jutsu, let's get to our number 1 spot. The Rasengan and its variants make no sense. Naruto's signature jutsu is simply confusing on many levels. Yay! The most heavily explained jutsu in the entirety of the IP makes no sense. I wonder if that has to do with your reading comprehension ability or the manga that seems to make sense to everybody else but you. Let's find out. The Rasengan jutsu technique takes form of a spiraling ball of chakra, and it was created by Naruto's father, Minato Namikaze, after he saw a tailed beast ball being used. See, what's crazy about this is that being able to write all of this implies that this person has at least seen Naruto, which makes the next couple of sentences all the more perplexing. The Rasengan requires a plentiful amount of chakra control to use it, and Naruto trains under Jiraiya to be able to harness its powers properly. Once again, requires that you've seen Naruto to know this. The article continues on by saying, one of the most confusing parts of this powerful jutsu is the fact that it is a close-range attack, despite being a ball that logically would be able to be thrown. And it's like, why? Why would that ball of chakra be able to be thrown? Because it's a ball? Because balls are thrown sometimes? Hey man, swords are thrown sometimes. Doesn't mean that you should try. Also, I love the idea of looking at a metaphysical ball and being like, oh, because look like baseball, must be able to be throw. Logically, as somebody who appears to be very focused on logic, how is that a reasonable conclusion to come to? What if the ball was made of water? And I'm not talking about a water balloon. And that ball of water required active input from Naruto to stay in the shape of a ball. The second that Naruto threw said ball, that active input would no longer be there, and thus that ball of water, because of the law of entropy, would return back to just a puddle. That's basically exactly what a Rasengan in its earliest sense is. It requires active input from Naruto to stay a Rasengan, and yet you say it is never explained why Naruto was told that there is no way to throw a Rasengan, and other inconsistencies follow with this variant of the jutsu. And while it's never necessarily explained in huge black and white text why Naruto can't throw a Rasengan, what part about the spiraling massive chakra that Naruto wasn't able to create and maintain until he figured out that he needed to use a shadow clone to create and maintain it ever came across to you as something that he would be able to throw with any real consistency? See, because if Naruto needs the active input of a shadow clone to keep a Rasengan in the shape of a ball, then why would you assume that that Rasengan would be able to maintain its shape and power when separated from Naruto's real physical body? The second that the Rasengan leaves Naruto's hand, he can no longer apply shape control to it. They don't work telekinetically, and yet the article goes on to say that some of the Rasengan's variants, like the Rasen Shuriken, are explained in great detail, while other forms are used without any discussion, making the logistics of the Rasengan feel even more perplexing despite how incredibly cool they are when used in action. And like, yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and say that Naruto doesn't get a bunch of Rasengan at the end of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War that are never necessarily explained, but in a sense, they are also explained. See, Naruto doesn't get things like this Curseal Rasengan until he becomes the pseudo 10-tailed Jinchuriki, at which point every single tailed beast who has Kekkei Genkai gives Naruto the ability to use said Kekkei Genkai, because that's how it works with tailed beasts. They can grant you the ability to use their Kekkei Genkai. It's why Han could use Steam Release. It's why Fushi could use Lava Release. It's why Gaara can control sand. And Naruto, who'd already been applying chakra releases to his Rasengan ever since the Wind Release Rasen Shuriken, figured out how to apply these Kekkei Genkai to his Rasen Shuriken because of the immense amount of experience he already had doing that exact thing. So while they don't sit us down and give us a lesson, They don't need to. It would slow down the pacing of what was already an incredibly slowly paced arc. So once again, this is an absolutely absurd thing to complain about, making this article one of the most absurd things I've ever read. The craziest thing about this article is that to write this article in the first place, it would require an even base amount of knowledge about Naruto. And yet every single opinion given seems to rally against that exact point. None of the jutsus featured on this article are confusing in the way that the author tells us that they are. And while there are absolutely things in Naruto that are 100% very confusing, nothing in this infinite feeling sprawl of letters even came close to any of those topics. So to the person who sent me this article, thank you. This is quite literally the worst CBR Sports-Kita-esque article I've ever experienced, and I'm furious. But hopefully, if there's any of you out there who were confused by any of these jutsus, watching this video cleared up a little bit of that confusion for you. And if there are any jutsus in the Naruto world that you're confused about, tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go work off this anger.